You've heard the word sustainability a million times, right? It's on your coffee cup, it's in company reports, you hear politicians talk about it all the time. But let's be real for a second. What does it actually mean? When we all use that word, are we even talking about the same thing? Let's dig in.
And yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? Is this whole sustainability thing just a trendy, feel-good label that companies slap on things, a buzzword? Or is it an actual plan, a blueprint for how we live on this planet?
Okay, to get a sense of just how massive this idea is, check this out. These are the UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. And you can see right away, this is way more than just trees and recycling. We're talking about ending poverty, guaranteeing quality education, creating affordable and clean energy, reducing inequality, and, of course, taking action on climate. The scope here is just enormous.
But having these amazing goals is one thing. Actually achieving them? Wow, that is a whole other story. It is incredibly complex. You're dealing with massive hurdles like global instability, the unbelievable challenge of getting hundreds of nations to agree and work together, and then, maybe the hardest part, figuring out how to take these giant global goals and make them actually work in your own local town.
So how do you even begin to tackle something so huge? Well, experts have a way of breaking it down into a core framework. It's often called the 3 pillars. And honestly, this is the key to getting your head around the whole concept. And here they are. This is the classic picture you'll see, the 3 pillars: society, environment, and economics. Now here is the most important part. True sustainability isn't just one of these circles. Nope, it is that magic spot right in the middle where all 3 overlap. They're all connected. You can't change one without affecting the others. It's all about finding that balance.
All right, let's dive into each one. First up, environmental sustainability. And I love this way of thinking about it. Natural capital. Just imagine the planet has this giant savings account full of resources. Sustainability is just living off the interest. The new trees that grow, the water that gets replenished. You never, ever touch the original capital. Simple as that.
Okay, next we have social sustainability. And this one is all about us, people. It's about building a society that can actually last because it's fair, because it's just, because everyone gets a real shot at a good life. We're talking about everything from human rights and education to just feeling like you belong to a strong community.
And finally, pillar number 3, economic sustainability. And this one might not be what you think. See, it's not just about making more and more money or endless growth. The real heart of it is making sure that pretty much everyone in a society has a dignified standard of living. Enough to be healthy, to be safe, and to fully participate in life.
So, okay, we've got these 3 big, important ideas. But how do we know if we're actually getting anywhere? This brings us to a crucial point, measurement. You've probably heard the old saying, right? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And that is exactly what we're talking about here.
Let's start with the environment. Here we've got to be really precise with our words. Take these 2 terms, degradation and depletion. They sound similar, but they are not the same thing. Resource degradation means the quality is dropping. Think of a river that's getting polluted. Resource depletion is about quantity. Think of a well that's literally running dry. Totally different problems, right? So they need totally different solutions.
Now, what about the economic and social side? Well, for decades, the big number everyone cared about was GDP, gross domestic product. It's basically just a measure of a country's total income. But now we have something much better, the Human Development Index, or HDI. This gives you a much fuller picture because it doesn't just look at money. It also factors in things like how long people live and how much education they get. It's a way better measure of how people are actually doing.
And what about fairness? How do you measure something like that? Well, take a look at this chart. It uses a tool called the Gini coefficient to show income inequality in different countries. Now, right now, just looking at it, these numbers and rankings might not mean a thing. But just hang on for a second, because once I explain what this Gini coefficient is, this whole chart is going to snap into focus and tell a really powerful story.
Okay, ready? The Gini coefficient is just a score. It runs from 0 to 1. That's it. 0 means perfect equality, like every single person has the exact same amount of money. 1 is perfect inequality. One person has literally all the money and everyone else has nothing. So with that in mind, if we think back to that chart, the countries with the lower scores, those are the ones where the wealth is spread out more evenly.
Okay, so we can measure this stuff. That's great. But the real puzzle, and this is where things get super interesting and complicated, is how these 3 pillars push and pull on each other. And that brings us to what I like to call the growth paradox. Here's the heart of it. We've always been told that economic growth is the goal, right? More growth is always better. But what if it's not? This quote nails it. If all that growth gives us is terrible pollution, sky-high stress, and massive inequality, are we really any better off? It's a huge question. And to really feel the power of growth, let me show you a little mental trick. It's called the Rule of 72. It's super simple. You take the annual growth rate, say 6%, and you divide 72 by it. So 72 divided by 6 is 12. That means at 6% growth, the economy and all the resources it uses will literally double in just 12 years. Think about that. It shows you just how fast growth can start putting crazy pressure on the planet and on society. So, this messy, complicated relationship between economic growth and the environment, well, there's a famous model that tries to explain it. It's called the environmental Kuznets curve, and it tells a really fascinating story, a hopeful one maybe. Let's walk through it. So, in the early days, when a country is just starting to industrialize, things get dirty. Pollution goes up. That's the first part of the curve, sloping upwards. But, and this is the theory, once a country gets wealthy enough, it hits a turning point. It can start to afford cleaner technology, better regulations, and the environment actually starts to get better. That's the downward slope. Now, I have to say, this is a pretty controversial idea. It definitely doesn't work for everything, like CO2 emissions, for example, and some people worry it just gives countries an excuse to pollute now and hope they can clean it up later. But it does show a possible path, from bad to worse, and then, fingers crossed, to better.
So, we've looked at the big goals, the three pillars, the tricky paradoxes, which leaves one giant question hanging in the air. Whose job is all this anyway? Who is actually responsible for making sustainability a reality?
And the answer, maybe not surprisingly, is all of us. It's a shared responsibility. It's not just one group's problem. It works when we as individuals change our daily choices. It works when businesses realize the world is changing and they need to adapt. And it works when governments put smart policies in place to guide everyone. It takes all three legs of the stool to stand.
And that really brings us right to the end. I hope you can see that sustainability is so much more than just a buzzword. It's this deep, complex blueprint for trying to balance our society, our economy, and our planet. It takes real thought, real measurement, and real action. And if it really does boil down to the choices we all make, well, the only question left is, what choice will you make today?